Okay, so this is the next part of the experiment. I've got a hole previously made. This is 10 mm deep. This is initially drilled with a flint drill, bow and drill, to a 10 mm depth. I'm now going to take over with essentially a hardwood drill, which I hope you can see I've marked in 10 mm increments. I'm going to see what the wear is. So I'm going to put that in there. We're going to use sand. I've got some beach sand, which I've sieved to make it nice and fine. And we've got some water, which I think is going to be critical for this. And really, I'm just going to sort of see how this goes. This is just a test. So I'm going to start with a sprinkle of that. Get our drill in its rightful place. Stick that in there. I'm going to give that a dribble of water. Slightly more than a dribble. A bit more sand. I'm just going to see how this goes. It goes on there, socket on top, and let's see if this works. Well, the water's definitely improving friction. I want to get into a rhythm that I can do for some time. This is not a race. Every now and again I'm going to stop, scoop in all that good stuff, splash more water, just a splash, splash more sand. We'll just see what happens really. And it goes. We'll keep going. You can probably tell I'm not racing at this. I'm literally just trying to get a rhythm that's decent. Interestingly, I can smell burning from the socket, the boxwood socket, but there's certainly no burning from down below in the stone itself. I think what might be really interesting at the end of this little test is how much drill is worn out for the sake of drilling into the stone. I'm dying to know what that ratio might be. Friction just increased a smidge there, so I'm just going to add a drop of water. Not too much, probably too much. That's better. You can probably tell I'm not really working hard at all. I mean, I haven't got into a sweat yet, which is nice. I suppose really, if you were doing this in some sort of organised way, I would probably build a rig that kept the drill in place and probably fed it with sand and a trickle of water, I think, would be a good idea. It's a bit too easy to flood that hole like that. But let's see. Right, there's an initial test. So the drill is hot. You can see the end that's been in the socket. It's got nice and hot. Here's my boxwood socket. I've used this quite a few times already, so there's not a significant amount of burning more in there actually. That's pretty normal. And then this end is interesting. So we started 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll measure that. So we certainly haven't got past one of the increments. Interestingly, I don't know whether you can see that, but there's clear striations on that wooden drill from the sand grains, which is interesting. And what will be really interesting is what's going on in this hole. So that's really interesting. So here's the hole. I don't know if you can see the hole here, but that's the hole in there. And what's interesting is that that's increased in depth by about 2 mil. Now that wasn't a long test at all. I'm going to do some proper tests, but that's a 2 mil increase. And here's the drill with striations. And the drill, interestingly, has worn by about 3 millimeters. So we're talking about 1/3 more wear on the wooden drill than on the stone, which is way less than I thought it would be. I thought it might be 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 or more than that. So that's quite interesting. I think I'm going to go for another go. Okay, so stage 2. Let's try that all again, but for a much longer period now. So a bit of sand in there, a smidge of water. I think I'm overdoing the water actually, but you know, I think you need enough, but not too much. Drill goes in position. That goes there, and socket on top. And let's go, see what we can do. I do think water is the key to keep the sand flowing in there really, otherwise it's too easy to just keep drilling when there's not that much friction. A little bit tricky. Let's get some more in there. I'll try a dry one there. Stick more of that in there. A smidge of water, not too much. There we go. You can hear when the friction has stopped, it just becomes really quiet. I'm assuming we don't want that noise. It doesn't take long to use up the sandy friction, does it? I almost think if you could rig up something that had a sort of feed of sand, a sandy sludge almost, I think that would be ideal. I'm getting that distinctive odour of boxwood burning on another hardwood. Try and keep this going. Try and keep that nice and sludgy. Still going. So you can, I'm sure you can see that the issue here is keeping enough sand going. Keeping it fed in there. There we go. Feels like we're getting a bit of a hole now, which is good. Okay, I've just moved the camera in slightly closer so you can get a slightly better view. Fresh sand. Let's get our drill in action. Just in there. I'm not going to say much now, I'm just going to do it. I'll talk at the end. A lot of faffing about with water. I feel like I'm just missing those long bursts of drilling. Some excruciating drill noises. Excuse my grunts, I have a cold and making strange noises without realising it. Right, let's see where we've got to on that. I mean, none of these sessions are particularly long, but we're definitely making inroads into that drill. Okay, so it's quite interesting actually. I'm wondering whether you can just see into that hole. Can you see those grooves? So those are pretty typical of the inside of a bored or a drilled hole in the Neolithic. We're down to about 12, maybe 13 mil on our hole. And interestingly, the drill has taken probably about 4 millimeters of wear. You can just see it's eking towards the 3 centimeter mark. So it's about 2 to 1 at the moment, 2 mils of wood and sand for every 1 millimeter of stone drilled. Only by continuing this for quite some time, which I'm going to do, will we get to grips with the reality of those figures. But I think I'll carry on and get back to you. Okay, so let me tell you what I've discovered. So you'll notice around the potential hole, is now a slurry of sand and water. I'm going to just finish off this bit that I'm doing, and then I can talk more. So that obviously goes in there. We know how that goes. I'll time it, but I've probably done another 10-15 minutes of drilling, not that much more. What the slurry is doing, interestingly, is creating a hopper, for want of a better term, a hopper that contains the sand particles and the water, but then improves the movement of the grains and aids the grinding, I think. You can see probably small flakes of charcoal dropping onto the slurry. Well, that's from the pivots, the boxwood pivot. But I just wanted to do a bit more to show you how this is working. You might be able to hear that the grinding sound is more continuous. I'm not having to stop every 2 seconds and top up. I'm going to do that now though. A bit more sand in there. This will be our final batch. And just a drop of water, and it's really important, I think, that the water is contained in there. There we go. I think you'll notice from the earlier footage that I don't have to keep stopping as often, but there's a sort of self-feeding process going on now. Okay, let's call that there. Just going to rinse off the drill and show you what's going on. So on the drill here we have got, we're down to the 3 mark, which I'll measure, but effectively we've probably done about 14 mil, I'll confirm that, 14 mil of wear from the drill end. All of these marks are marked from the drill end. And we've obviously got down here a hole surrounded by slurry. I'm going to clean all that off now and give you measurements, and then we can have another chat. Here we are, let's just run through this quickly. So here's the drill, and effectively there's 15 mil of wear on this drill tip from where I initially marked from the end of the drill to where it's reached now. You can clearly see these beautiful striations where the sand and the grit has been wearing with the wood. So that's 15 mil of wear on the hardwood. This is a beechwood drill, by the way, beechwood drill. We've got the boxwood socket, hardly any wear on there. There's a bit of friction happening, there's a bit of smoke and an occasional bit of soot falling, but not much. So what's really interesting is that for our 7 mil depth in our hole from where we started, we've essentially used 2 millimeters of wood for every 1 millimeter of stone we've drilled through. And this is why we experiment. But what's really interesting is that when I started, I was taking a lot of time pausing, pouring in more sand, more water. You'll remember the water was spilling everywhere. But actually, once we're past that initial surface depth, which was, we started at about 10 mil, then what happens is that the slurry, the used sand, builds up this slurry and actually creates almost a hopper. It's a sort of ring of slurry, which makes it easier to contain future sand and future water. It becomes this sort of self-feeding friction slurry, really. And so really, given that in total, this has probably been maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes of actual drilling time. I'll time that when I look back through the footage. But let's say 15 minutes, certainly no more, I don't think. In 15 minutes, we've gone 7 mil through the stone, sandstone, with a beechwood drill. And it's not like we've used the entire drill. we've literally used 14 mil of wood. I think that's quite impressive and actually quite unexpected. It's been some time, and I think I'm somewhere close to actually getting through this stone. I think since I left you, I've done about 105 actual drilling minutes. My drill is worn down significantly, but I've still got my marks, so I can tell what the wear is. So what I've learnt so far is that the deeper the hole gets, almost the easier it is to manage. So I'm putting in fresh sand, a bit of water. It's easy to overdo the water. In goes my drill, going for the pivot on top, and we're just gonna try and get a rhythm going. All the time I'm listening for the sand, for the friction to be cutting. And when it's not cutting, I'm going to add more. So because I've just cleaned everything and measured everything, there's not enough sand in there, so I'm going to go for a bit more, get a sludge building up. There we go. And then that's the noise we want. So what I've discovered is that the slurry builds up a lip which contains more sand as we add it. If we need to keep the cutting, we just lift the drill momentarily, and it obviously pushes some sand down into the hole and cuts. So what I'll do at the end of this video is I'll put all the figures on a black screen for you. So if you want to try and replicate this, you can. But really, the mission now is to see if we can get through to the other side. Somewhere around 40 mil thick, this sandstone lump. According to my measurements, I've already cut through 42 mil, so obviously my caliper measurement wasn't quite bang on, otherwise we'd be through already. Difficult to know if there'll be a sudden change when we pierce through to the other side. Add some more grit in there, some more sand, a bit more water. Better, that's a better noise. So what's interesting is that most of the time I'm getting a couple of mil depth, so I've been doing it in 10-minute bursts, and I've been cutting about 2 mil through the stone at the cost of about 4 or 5 mil on the drill, and that was going pretty straightforwardly. And then I had one session where I literally cut nothing in the hole and wore out 6 mil of the drill. So it's difficult to know whether that's a softer part of the beechwood drill or whether it's a harder part of the stone. But until that point, it had been going pretty steadily, and I felt I knew what the wear was in both the stone and at the drill tip. But we should be somewhere very close to piercing this stone. It's all about refinements, tasks like this. I've learned so much in this initial experiment, which will help me to do further drilling tests. And it's always surprising the kind of things you learn, the refinement of the skill. Obviously, in this case, the long draw of the bow helps. Short little pushes aren't anywhere near as efficient. Making sure there's grit in the right place is crucial. Making sure there's enough water to aid lubrication, but also aid the sand falling back into the hole. Okay, we'll take a break there. Here we go. So, hopefully the final push. A good slurry in there now. Gonna add a bit more sand, a fair bit of water. That will do. Let's keep the momentum going. That's a good noise. More sludge in the bottom there. can see right down to the base. We must be somewhere very close. I mean, that's close. I'm sort of slightly amazed I can't quite see the pad. Slightly different noise and vibrations suddenly starting. I wonder what that means. Maybe not. Alright, let's just see where we are. Quick flip. Ah, we're through. We are through. Let me show you that. It's a tiny little hole. I'll clean it up, but we are through right there. That's the other side of the hole, which I will wash off and show you. I'll have a proper look at that now. I think that's what the noise was. There was a sudden vibration and a slightly different noise, and I'm assuming that's where we actually pierced the other side. Let me clean this up and I'll show you it clean. Here's a few close-ups. So you can see, there's a hole through that stone. That's taken a while, but I tell you something, not as long as I thought it would take. So obviously this side is much wider. The other side, we've literally just got our first piercing there. And obviously to make this hole parallel through there is going to require a fair bit more drilling. But the timings are interesting. As I say, I'll put that all up at the end. But I think what I'm going to do is possibly turn the camera off now and just try and work my way through. Might actually film from this side, see what happens, and see where we get to. Brilliant. Okay, so I've just done another 10 minutes off camera, and I thought I should show you what's going on. The hole has widened by another 8 mil. It's now a 10 mil hole. But what's interesting is the drill, of course, because it's pierced here, the tip of the drill is no longer wearing. It's the shoulder, of course, that's moving back to widen the hole. I'm going to carry on for a bit, and then I'll clean it all up and show you the sort of finished results. I might work on this in my own time, but effectively, if I show you that hole through there, you can see that that's a pretty decent width now. And from the other side, it's actually very neat. I'm loving the neatness of it all. So there we are. How to drill a hole in sandstone using a beechwood drill, sand and some water. I'm going to put up all the figures at the end on a black screen so you can see how long this took in total. Thanks for watching.